as United States, those that are here in the US, and whether you be a citizen or not, I think we have such a privilege because we understand mental health. And believe it or not, there are many places in the world where mental health is not a concept. They don't understand what it is. It is far-fetched. And so we have an opportunity to shape the world around this concept. We have an opportunity to influence people globally, not just our families and our community, but to think globally about how can we take this concept of mental health and really spread it, because it is affecting us throughout the world. And yes, what's happening in Ukraine and Russia does affect us here in the US, and what's happening in Israel and so forth, it does affect us here. So just starting off, I want to start off with being a freshman in college. I went to Nyack College for undergraduate school, which is, if anybody knows where that is right by the Palisades Mall in Nyack, New York. I was a freshman in college when I received a call from my father, who told me he wanted to kill himself. I was 18 years old, and I was actually studying psychology. I had just gotten out of the Bronx, where I was born and raised. Really, mental illness had ran in my family for generations, but no one called it mental health. I believe we lacked the language at the time, and in a sense, we lacked permission to actually talk about mental health and talk about our emotions. And at the time, I was really trying to make sense out of the 18 years of my life living and growing up in the Bronx, where I witnessed firsthand domestic violence in my own home, where my father was abusive to my mother, and I thought it was normal. Witnessing homelessness firsthand, growing up in the New York City shelter system, again, I thought it was normal. Witnessing neighbors being shot and killed in the Bronx, again, in my world as a child, it was normal. And then witnessing firsthand drug addiction in my family, where most of the men in my family were incarcerated. As a child, I constantly asked myself, is life supposed to be this way? I knew something was wrong with the way I grew up, but I didn't have the language to really understand it. Now, fast forward, as a college student, I thought I had escaped this terrible life that was handed to me, only to find that I had to confront it again. While I wasn't able to save my father, while I was able to save my father then, who wanted to kill himself at the time that I was 18 years old, I was able to talk him out of it. I realized that there was something fundamentally wrong, and that was that he was suicidal. And not only was he suicidal, my mother was suicidal too. Ultimately, my father ended up dying years later due to mental health issues, and due to drug addiction. Just backing up, let's be real. Mental health has not been a concept that we've understood. Let's say 20 years ago in Black and Brown communities, mental health was not something we really talked about. We, as Black and Brown people, we've been shunned from talking about our emotions, from talking about our pain. We have been taught how to hide what we're feeling, especially in our families where secrets reign. When we know certain people in our family have been raped and molested, we've been trained and told to keep it a secret and to not say anything about it. I think one of the reasons and one of the challenges that we face, and again, speaking as a Black woman, is that we were never able to be human, right? Humanity was essentially stripped from us for so many years. We were not allowed to show our pain, to show our displeasure. And so we bore hundreds of years of suffering. And essentially, we learned to just be okay with not being okay. So now that we're talking about mental health years later, how do we help our communities to understand that it is okay to talk about your emotions? It's okay to talk about your pain. It's okay to talk about your trauma. How do we get our communities to trust us? How do we get ourselves to talk about what we've been going through and what we had to endure when it has not been popular, when we've been told not to show hurt? You know, it was never safe to share our trauma because sharing our trauma had serious implications. One of the implications has been our kids being removed from our care. And I have seen this so many times in my profession as a social worker, where mental health was used as a weapon to take away our children, right? We've seen that. And so there is a real distrust around being able to talk about your emotions and talk about your trauma. It could mean your kids being removed. It could mean being stigmatized, right? Being seen as crazy, or being seen as there's something wrong with you, or even being outed by your own family or by your own community. So while we have come a long way, I want to acknowledge that there has been work. We have come a long way over the years, but I do believe that there is still trauma going on, even coming out of the pandemic, where many of us, especially in New York City, lost so many people, whether it was a loved one, a neighbor, or someone that you knew. We are just coming out of this pandemic, but the new pandemic that we're in is a mental health pandemic. It is one in which people don't know really how to heal. And they're looking for us, those that are here on a Zoom call tonight, for the answers. They're looking to us to help lead and guide them towards a way of healing. One of my roles as a CEO, a chief executive officer of a nonprofit, is to design mental health programs for kids and families in schools. And I can tell you that in the last 3 years, my organization has seen such an uptick or such an increase, and so many children that are facing trauma and mental health issues. I have had a client about 3 years ago in the South Bronx who was being suspended from school, and who the principal and the school deemed as disruptive and someone that was non-compliant. And when my team and I got to meet with this young girl who was a teenager, we learned that the reason why she was so disruptive in school was because of her uncle, who was a father figure to her, had been brutally murdered in the home of her grandmother in the Bronx. So she was coming to school fighting through this grief and this loss that no one really helped her to unpack. And we were able to help this young girl and get her the resources and therapy she needed so that she can begin to confront the trauma she was dealing with and grieve. And she represents, we serve thousands of kids in New York City, but she represents one out of thousands of children in New York City that are dealing with this type of trauma that often goes undetected and unnoticed, and it is often policed, where our children should be having solutions to heal. Instead, they're often punished in schools. And so our work as advocates, as mental health advocates, whether you are one that has lived experience, you are an advocate. Whether you are one by degree or by profession, you are an advocate. And we have a responsibility morally to begin to show our communities what it looks like to bring healing. Trauma, and I say this all the time, trauma does not go away if it's not confronted. And oftentimes what we have and what we see is that a lot of our community members, and even some of us right now on a Zoom, have experienced so much trauma, but we have never confronted it. So where does trauma go if it's not confronted? It stays with you, but it spills out in your behavior and your emotions and your health. There are studies that show that there are correlations to the way that your mental wellness is and your health. So for people that are dealing with anxiety and panic attacks, and some of them leading to health issues, a lot of that stems from mental health. And so we have such a challenge, again, to confront and to help bring healing to our communities. I want to tell you this evening that mental health really did save my life. And though I could not save my father, I am committed to empowering as many people as possible, whether it be through talks, whether it be through my organization, or whether it be through other ways, I'm committed to this work. I think one of the other challenges that we face as Black and Brown people is we have been so trained by culture and by society to be disconnected from our own hearts, our own minds, and we have been told that emotions are weak. We have been told, leave your emotions at the door. There's no place for that. But it turns out it is impossible to leave your emotions at the door. You're human. Everything that we do is based on an emotion, right? So we have to dispel the myth of you can't be emotional or being emotional is weak. Being emotional or having emotions is human. So what I want us to do is to really start to reimagine mental health in the context of humanity. As I mentioned, I'm a single mother to a beautiful daughter named Genesis, who's downstairs probably listening to me right now. And I know it is a challenge for those of us that are parents to check in with our children about their mental health, because we're still grieving from loss, abuse, and other traumas that we probably never told anyone about. Being an adult doesn't mean that you checked up all the boxes, right? Doesn't mean that. In fact, in my work, one of the things that I also get to do is I get to train supervisors in child welfare around leadership. And what's really interesting in my training of leaders in child welfare in New York City is about 95% of the people that I train that are child welfare workers have unconfronted trauma, unconfronted. So they're adults, they're working in a system, right? And they have trauma that they've never confronted. Most of them are Black and Brown people. And I work with them every day around leadership, but also around confronting the things that they have held on for so many years. About 5 years ago, I put on a event where we addressed domestic violence in the North Bronx. And we brought together community members. Most of them were seniors. And what was really interesting in that domestic violence event was that so many of the audience members had dealt with abuse, but they never told anyone. And these were seniors. So what makes a person, or what makes us deal with trauma, deal with abuse, and never give ourselves permission to heal? So I want to challenge that system of thought that we have to keep going. We tell ourselves things like no pain, no gain. But I think these are things that we say to justify not being able to deal with our own mental health. But in reality, I believe this, and I teach this, that we, you, I, all of us here on the Zoom, we actually have the power to choose, right? We don't have to live this life where life keeps happening to us, but it's not happening with us. Life can happen for us, right? It doesn't keep be happening to us. We don't have to keep telling ourselves, keep going. You gotta endure this pain, right? We actually get to change that system of thought. We actually have the power to choose. And so for those that are mental health advocates that are on the Zoom, and those that have the lived experience. So if you are a person that deal with mental health challenges, I also want to challenge you. I want to challenge you because you are a decision maker, right? And the way that we reimagine mental health is that we influence not just our own selves, our own families, but we also influence policy, right? This is one thing that I learned that I think is so powerful, is that policy actually determines each of our quality of life. It determines where we're going to live, where we can take our kids to school. It determines our credit, where we buy a home, whether we can buy a car. It determines our health, our access to health insurance. And all of this affects our quality of life, which affects our mental health. So what does that mean? That means that each of us here, whether you are a person with lived experience or you are an advocate, your voice is so powerful and so needed. I'll say this. Right now, I'm actually in Boston, so I'm not in New York, and I'm studying at Harvard University public policy. And one of my desires is to really understand mental health, and education on a larger scale. And what's interesting right now in my experience with my classmates who are from all over the globe, very few of them understand what mental health is. There is a very scarce understanding. So while we have the privilege to talk about this openly in this forum, on this Zoom, I want us to also understand that in addition to influencing our immediate communities, this is something that we also need to think about outside of our where we live. So what does that look like? We need the voices of each of you. If you have lived experience, if you are a mental health advocate, if you are an educator, if you are a parent, you have the power to influence policy. You have the power to design policy and to implement policy. I truly believe that lived experiences is priceless. You can't go to school to learn lived experience. It is absolutely priceless. So for those of you that feel like I don't have anything to offer, you do. You do have something to offer. It's your experience. And people need to hear that. Policymakers need to be able to hear that. So what does mental health reimagine look like? I believe that we, as a people, Black and brown people, we have to redefine what mental health is, what healing looks like for our communities. And I truly believe that it looks like coming together, sort of what we're doing right now. I believe it looks like acknowledging our pain together, individually, but also collectively. I believe it looks like confronting our fears together. I think a lot of people are afraid to confront their fears because they feel like they have to do it alone. But if we do it together, right, if we confront our fears together, it becomes much easier because we're not alone. I also believe culturally, mental health looks like music. It looks like singing. It looks like dancing. It looks like meditating. It looks like praying. It is whatever I believe brings us healing. I also want to challenge you again to take care of yourself. This is something we've been hearing a lot about. We've been hearing about self-care, but I truly want you to challenge yourself, and I challenge you, and I challenge myself as well, to take care of you first. We are often the person we neglect most. We are often the person we forget about most. I don't believe that we can effectively empower our communities around mental health if we are neglecting ourselves. So I challenge each of us and myself again to remember ourselves and to also prioritize ourselves. I also want to challenge you to remember that you have the power to choose for yourself and for your families and for your communities, and that you don't have to accept the narrative that I don't have a choice. That's often what we hear. I don't have a choice, right? Turns out you do. You do have a choice. You can choose to check in with yourself. You can choose to check in with your kids, with your families. You can choose to confront trauma. You can choose to heal. You can choose. So in my closing, as I'm wrapping up, I actually want to invite you to close your eyes if you feel okay and comfortable doing that. I want you to close your eyes for just a few seconds. I know that may feel uncomfortable for us, especially New Yorkers, when we're always out and about. But I want to invite you to close your eyes for just a few seconds. And I want you to imagine what it looks like to feel at peace. I want you to imagine what it feels like to be at your best self. Imagine what it feels like to be satisfied, to be content with life, to be happy, to be whole. Maybe for some of us, it's feeling rested. Maybe for some some of us, it's feeling balanced. Maybe it's going on that dream vacation with your family, or maybe it's working your dream job. For parents like me, maybe it's seeing the smile on your child's face, or maybe it's helping and empowering others. Maybe it's prioritizing and investing in your own self. Now, for those that close their eyes, I want you to open them. And I just want to let you know that you just imagined and reimagined your own mental health. That's what you just did. Reimagining means being able to see yourself whole, being able to see yourself healed, being able to see your children, your families, and our communities healed before it actually happens. And reimagining means recognizing that we are the ones that get to determine what mental health looks like today for us. So I want to leave with you 3 quick thoughts in my closing. The first is give yourself permission to be human and grant yourself grace to feel. Number 2, I want you to prioritize yourself and be your strongest advocate for mental health. And 3, choose. We collectively define what healing looks like for our communities. So whether you're a parent, an educator, an expert, or a neighbor, your voice is absolutely powerful in shaping our policies and shaping your life and shaping your communities. And I truly believe that if we work together collectively as a community, we have the power to rewrite our own stories and to be an example, not just for our families, our communities in New York City, but I do believe we have an opportunity to be an example to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanequa.
I think I'm inviting my colleague on. Dr. Green, I believe, is next. So Dr. Green is up next. He is an incredible mastermind, brilliant. He has an incredible story. I had the privileges of interviewing him and learning more about him. And so I introduce to those that don't know Dr. Green.
Thank you so much for that opening and that wonderful keynote. Much appreciated for that. I had no oxygen left in my lungs. I was reaching for the surface, but I couldn't grasp it. I had no orientation of what was up, down, left, or right. I was doing somersaults underneath the water. I was panicking. At this point in my life, my mental health was at its worst. I had idols set before God. I had low confidence, low self-esteem. I didn't know where I was headed in life. I really didn't have a direction or a purpose. It turns out that my closest encounter with death was actually my wake-up call. See, I was swimming out in the Caribbean Sea to this rock, this island rock that I saw in the middle of the water when I got caught in a riptide. And I didn't know why God had this happen at this point in time in my life until after I was able to come out of the situation. And it doesn't make sense for me to be able to be here and talk about this situation where I'm in the middle of the water, fighting for my life, reaching for the surface, and at my last breath, coming to the point to where I'm in agreement with saying, I'm just going to open up my mouth and take in water and get it over with because I have nothing left to give. And when your mind has that conversation with your body and just says, yeah, I'm done, like that's it, that whole life flash, the life flashing before your eyes thing that they dramatize in the movies, that's real. And what I saw was less than satisfying. There was so much that I had yet to accomplish, so many gifts and talents that I had that I just let go to waste, so many things that I haven't done, people who I loved, who I haven't told them how I truly felt, people who I love, who I've been prioritized. And I was like, this can't be it. This cannot be it. After I, got out of this episode, by the grace of God, I looked up online and it said that 320,000 individuals die annually from drowning. So I knew that there was a reason for me to still be here to talk about this. And that's when I had a mission. That's when I had a goal to go and help any and everybody, whether they're dealing with stress, whether they're dealing with any mental health problems, anxiety, depression, whatever it be. Right. I was in the perfect major and I wanted to take what I learned and help other individuals who are going through similar situations. And being a man of color, especially in America, there are a lot of us who deal with stress, who deal with anxiety, who deal with depression, who deal with identity issues, all of that. And so that's where my mission began. And so tonight, I just want to leave with you guys some practical ways to manage stress, because stress is leading, one of the leading causes of death. It's associated with the 6 top causes of death globally, right? And as a Black community, we're already losing our numbers at a fast enough rate. So if there's anything that we can do to preserve that, then that's exactly what I want to do. Stress is such a big topic that we talk about, but we don't fully know the whole entire story, right? Stress is bad, stress is terrible, stress is negative, and this is all true. But what I've done is I've done the research behind it and found that there's another side to stress. There's a positive side to stress. There's a way that we can use stress for our success, for our benefit instead of our detriment, right? And so there's just a couple things that I want to leave you with, a couple things that you can apply to your life and start changing your physiology right now. Start changing and rewiring your brain right now. Start changing the way that you respond and not react. See, responding is responding with intention. Reacting is just acting out of emotion, acting out of anger, out of fear, right? So we want to respond instead of react. Only things I want you to leave with is TMB. T stands for take back control. B is breath work. And then M is managing transitions. T, take back control. No longer are we going to say, oh, this person just, they stressed me out. They made me they get on my last nerves, right? We are no longer going to say they made me angry, because that is giving them control over our physiology. When you get angry, you have your blood vessels constrict, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, all of that, right? We're saying that person did all of that to you? No. The way that we interpreted what they said, that's what raised all of those biological elements in our body, right? So we're no longer going to give other people that permission over ourselves. And you're like, all right, cool. Dr. Green, sounds great. I'm going to take ownership of it. But now how do I calm my body in those stressful situations, right? Whether it's kids, whether it's colleagues, whether it's friends, right? Whether it's your boss. How do I get back in control of my body and my mind? The next one, breath work. So it's very difficult to calm a stressed mind by using a stressed mind. What do you mean? When we are in a stress state, it's very difficult to think ourselves out of that stress state, right? Because your mind is not thinking clearly. When we're stressed, we're in the survival mode. That means we have a lack of activity in the frontal cortex, our executive functioning, all of the reasoning, the logic that we do, the executive decisions that we're able to make. And all of it's in the limbic system, the amygdala, which is in charge of our fear, our anxiety, our anger, so on and so forth. And when people say you're acting out of your emotions, that's exactly what's going on in the brain. So how do we change that? Well, we have to rely on the body. Every single emotion that we have is associated with your breathing patterns. When you're excited, you have a certain breathing pattern, right? When you're angry, you have a certain breathing pattern. When you're happy, you have a certain breathing pattern. When you're surprised, you have a certain breathing pattern, right? So our breath work is associated with all of these different emotions. So there's something called the physiological sigh, right? Essentially, we have this group of neurons on our heart that tells our heart rate, tells our brain to slow down our heart rate whenever our exhale is longer than our inhale. So what does this mean? If we are in a stressful situation and we just instantly we want to calm ourselves down before we do or say something that we don't want to happen, or we allow that stressful situation to turn into chronic stress, which means it's affecting us for days, weeks, months, and even years, which that happens all the time. Something that happened with a family member, someone close to you, somebody hurt you, that affects you years from now. How do we get out? So all we need to do is double inhale, which is, and then a slow, relaxed exhale. What that does is the group of neurons on our heart communicates with our brain saying to slow the heart rate down. When you are able to slow the heart rate down, that automatically changes the activity in your brain. No longer are you in the survival mode. When your heart rate is down, your brain tells your body, oh, I'm safe. I'm fine. I don't need to be in survival mode. I can think logically. I can process things clearly again. I don't have to have such high activity in my mind to where I'm over analyzing, over focusing, or overthinking on things that are continuing to perpetuate my stress. Breath work is very, very important. Physiological sigh, just double inhale and a long exhale. Finally, managing transitions, right? So there are so many transitions that we have in life as adults, right? You wake up and you get out of bed and you start getting ready for work. That is the transition right there, right? And getting ready for work, you've gotten dressed and all of that stuff, and then you go downstairs and you have breakfast. That's a transition right there. And if you have a spouse or if you have kids, being social with the spouse or the kids, interacting with them, that's a transition. Then going from your house to work, that commute, that's a transition. And then from the commute from the car to the work, and then you have a transition from walking in the building to answering phone calls, transition from phone calls to emails, transition from emails to meetings to whatever else you have to do during the day. And then you go home, and any other social part of your day that you want to have, those are also transitions. What's happening is we are losing energy in those transitions. I want you to think of each transition as a doorway, right? When I was growing up, when I was a kid, my mom always used to say, in or out, in or out. You're not going to waste out. You're not going to let out all my cold air, right? Or when I was going in the fridge, right? You stop going in my fridge. You letting out all the cold air, right? I want you to think of a transition just like that, right? Because every time we go from one event in our life to the next, or one event in our day to the next, that's a transition. And if we don't internally situate ourselves during that transition, then all the stress that we had from this one moment, all the anxiety that we had, all the angst, the built up tension that we had in that moment, that overflows into the next moment. And then all the things that happen, anything negative that happened in that moment, plus the initial moment, that then builds up to the third moment. And at the end of the day, we wonder why we're so tired, why we're so exhausted. It's because we've never, ever given ourselves the chance to reset. So it's something that I did that helped me through grad school called release meditation technique. I didn't even know it was a technique at the time, but now they put a name to it. All you do is in between each transition to manage your energy, increase your energy, and also manage your stress levels to keep you calm and just renew yourself before you go into the next transition. All you do is you sit there and you breathe and you allow yourself to feel yourself. What does that mean? Feeling the sensations of our body. So if we're stressed, we often hold it in certain areas, right? I hold my stress in my throat. Some people hold their stress in their shoulders. Some people feel it in their back, right? Their lower back. Some people even feel it in their legs. Some people feel it in their arms. What you need to do is imagine that stress just falling off as you're breathing, right? Practicing the physiological side that we just practiced. And just imagining the stress falling off. When you create the imagery of the stress falling off, your body responds because of the mind-body connection. Feel that stress falling off. And just thinking release, 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 release. Do it for 20 seconds, 30 seconds. It does not take time at all. Then after that, I want you to think of and imagine and focus on the type of person that you want to be in this next environment. Whether this next environment is with your spouse, with your kids, with people on the phone, with coworkers, with your boss, with the COO, whoever it is, right? Imagine the type of person you want to be. What type of energy do I want to bring into this next moment? What type of character do I want to bring? What type of emotions do I want to bring? Who do I want to represent in this next moment? Because the things that we focus on are the things that we are eventually going to run into. And that is very, very important, right? And the total time of this maybe takes 60 seconds. You do this within each transition in your day, and you'll end the day with so much more energy. You'll be so much more relaxed. You'll be so much more stress-free because you gave yourself the time to internally situate yourself before you stimulated yourself with the external environment. Now, these are just a couple quick things. I like to talk about, mental health, but I also like to give people, how can we change our lives right now? What's the application, right? What's the meat? We don't want to talk about the fluffy stuff. What can I do right now that's going to start changing things? And that's what I want to leave you all with. I help individuals manage stress. I help individuals recover from burnout, as I've experienced both of those myself. I've created an entire platform for it. And I would love to continue to talk about that. They have my information. I can put it in the chat and we can continue talking about this after the event. But this is one of my passions. I have coaching programs and courses on this. And I love it because of not only what it's done for me, but what it does for other individuals. So I'm super appreciative of just having the time and opportunity to share it with you all. And I really hope that you're able to apply it and that it does help you. And so now, without further ado, I want to pass the mic over to our next guest speaker, which is Ms. Tiana Washington, who's going to talk about creative self-care.
Dr. Green, I would be remiss if I did not thank you for that amazing segment. It's an amazing feeling being able to be a panelist and receive gems, resources, and information from your other panelists. So thank you for that. And hello, everyone. Welcome to your self-care compassion activity. My name is Tiana Washington. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am so excited to guide you through this session focused on your self-care and self-compassion. This activity that we'll be doing together today really aims to help us practice self-care and nurture our mental health by being kind and understanding to ourselves. So before we begin, I'd like for you to take a moment to notice your body. I'm going to ask you to relax your shoulders, unclench your jaw, notice any tension that you may feel in your body. I know it's approaching 7. A lot of us are just coming in from work, getting settled, probably situating dinner in the kitchen. But I want you to know that this time belongs to you. When we talk about self-compassion, it involves treating ourselves with the same kindness, concern, and support that we would give to a good friend. This exercise will help us to acknowledge our struggles, offer our self-kindness, and recognize that we deserve the same grace that we give to others, and that we are not alone in our experiences. I'll provide you some prompts to guide your writing, but please feel free to allow your thoughts and your emotions to take you wherever they take you. There is no right or wrong way to do this. It's all about personal reflection, self-kindness, and giving yourself the time that you deserve. Let's start with our first prompt. I want you to think about a time recently when you may have felt inadequate, struggled, or faced a challenge in some way. Take a moment to reflect on that experience. No writing, just reflect. I'm going to give us a few moments to do so. Now, I'm going to ask if you have a writing utensil, a pen, pencil, and paper. Preferably, if you don't, that's okay. If you can open the Notes app on your phone. Because what I want you to do is write a letter to yourself about that experience. But I want you to imagine that you are writing to a close friend who is going through the same thing. What would you say to offer comfort and understanding. In this letter, I want you to give yourself permission to not have it all together, to not have all the answers, and to know that that is okay. Earlier, our keynote speaker mentioned the struggles faced by BIPOC communities and the pattern of disconnecting from our pain, the pattern of having to be the strong one in our families and in our communities. And right now, in this moment, I want you to know that it is okay to take off your cape. This time belongs to you. Here's your first prompt. And if at all possible, if someone could also write the prompt in the chat, I'd greatly appreciate that. Dear friend, I know you're going through a tough time right now because ... And I'm going to repeat that. Dear friend, I know you are going through a tough time right now because ... In the next prompt, I want you to think about how you can show yourself kindness and support in thinking about that situation that you highlighted earlier. What do you need to hear right now? What do you need to feel seen, to feel validated in your experiences? I want you to write about the kind words and encouragement that you would offer yourself in this letter. And with your final prompt, you can start with this. It is okay to feel this way because blank. It is okay to feel this way because blank. So just to recap, we've highlighted a situation in which we may have felt inadequate, a challenge that we have faced. And in the first prompt, in us writing to this friend, I want you to acknowledge the tough time that they're going through. But with your second prompt, I want to hear, what do you need to feel supported in this moment? I'm going to give us 2 minutes to do that, and then we will come back together. You have about 1 more minute. 1 more minute. I'm going to ask that we all come back together. And I hate to rush you. Typically, when I do this activity, we do it for a longer amount of time, but we have so many great resources and I don't want to cut time away from it. And know that this is an activity that you can continue after today's event. Now, I'm going to ask if you feel comfortable in our chat to share just a part of your letter with the group. Remember that this is a safe space and Sharing can help us to feel connected and supported. However, it is completely okay to keep your letter private if you prefer. But I am going to invite some responses into the chat. And as we wait for possible responses to come through, I want to acknowledge that practicing self-compassion can be challenging, especially in a climate where you are expected to or taught to take care of everyone else. The thought of extending grace to yourself or self-compassion can feel almost foreign or difficult to do. But I want us to remember today that self-compassion is a practice, and it is okay to take small steps. I thank you all for being here with us. And right now, what we're actually going to do is transition to a panel discussion with our keynote. Oh, you know what? Let me pause. I did see that we had a response in the chat, and I do want to give space to that. If that's okay, Barbara, just for maybe 30 more seconds. John, thank you for that response. It is okay to feel this way because you've been working hard the past few days and needed some rest. You are not perfect. I need that too sometimes. Received. Thank you. I'm going to open the floor to our panelists. We're going to have a panel discussion. And I think a great way that we can open up Ms. Moore and Dr. Green, I'd like to know what if you could, would be one takeaway that you would like for the audience to walk away with today in regards to their mental health? What is one takeaway that you'd like for them to walk away with? And I think for me, it would be to know that you don't have to be in a state of crisis to seek out therapy. I think in the mental health world, rightfully so, we acknowledge and we speak a lot about trauma and the experiences of childhood and young adulthood that a lot of us face in our communities. But I want our audience to know that you can also seek out therapy to help in navigating the new role of parenthood, challenges at work, anxious or negative thoughts that you notice impact your well-being and your self-esteem. These reasons are all just as valid and important as trauma. And sometimes when we voice that or articulate that to individuals, the response might be, well, what do you need to go to therapy for? There's no need for that. I want you to know that all reasons are valid in seeking out support and that there is no shame around that.
I think that was incredible, Tiana. And maybe to add to that, in addition to what you said, which I think was really powerful, and just thank you for taking us through that exercise, because I recently was beating myself up. For some of us that are like high achievers, we deal with a lot of anxiety. I know sometimes I do. And I couldn't get this one economic problem today. And it seemed like everyone else was getting it but me. And I also happened to be the only Black person. So that added to it. And I started saying, well, why are you here? You don't belong here. Well, I started to question my value. And then I gave myself grace, and I said, because you belong here and it's okay. And I had to I said, slow down, look at the problem again and do it again. And when I slowed down, I was able to get it. But I was beating myself up because I could not get something. And I think as a mental health, a licensed social worker and a mental health advocate, a lot of times us in this space, I think there are some of us on the call on the Zoom tonight, those that are in this work. I think one of our major challenges is being the hero to everyone else and not having the ability or the tools to help our own selves. And so we burn ourselves out. where we deal with all types of issues, but we justify as professionals, like, no, I can't get therapy. You know, I'm the advocate. So I think humanizing yourself, like be human. It is okay to be human. I tell my staff this all the time. We have emotional check-ins. I teach this humanity work everywhere I go because I believe that we've been taught to be like robots, like show up and not be yourself. That is impossible. Show up and be yourself. And if you're having a bad day, it's okay. If you're dealing with something, it's okay. Give yourself permission to be human. I think that's one of the greatest things I want everyone on the Zoom call to take away is to give yourself permission to be human. I think that's really important. You know, that's a doctor.
Those are incredible pieces of advice. I love both of those. Very, very important. If there's anything I could add to it, it would be that self-care is not being selfish. A lot of us find it difficult to practice self-care because we're naturally givers. We put ourselves last and we put everybody else first. We make everybody else a priority. But at the end of the day, if you're not able to give from a full cup, you're doing a disservice not only to you, but also to the person that you're trying to give to. You want to make sure that you're able to pour out from what's an overflow and not from your last bits left in your glass or left in your jar, right? And so just think about this. If you had a child, right, a little child, and they're like, I want to go to the park. And you're like, cool, okay, we'll go to the park at 3 p.m. later today once I finish everything. 3 p.m. comes and they come, are we going to the park? And like, no, maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow comes. Are we going to the park? No, maybe the next day. Are we going to the park? No, right? The child is going to start to feel like they don't matter. The child is going to start to feel like they don't have value. The child is going to feel a lack of love, right? Because the thing that you said you were going to do for the child, you don't do. It's the same way with ourselves. If we say we're going to do this thing for ourselves, we say we're going to do this thing that's going to help ourselves, and we oftentimes push it off. I'll get to it the next day, the day after that, or I'll do all these other things first, right? We need to prioritize ourselves so that you can be even more of who you naturally are, which is a giver. Self-care is not selfish.
I also just wanted to lift up, that was incredible, Dr. Green. And I think it resonates with all of us here that often feel like if we are prioritizing us, it's almost seen as, you know, this act of selfishness, but it really isn't. And I appreciate you for saying that. Monica here, I just wanted to uplift what she says in the chat. Monica, if you don't mind me saying what you said here, I think this is so powerful. Thank you first for just your vulnerability, right? And your transparency. And she says it's okay to feel alone and be sad sometimes because you left behind many things, your family, your loved ones, your friends, your country at this age to support your husband. It is okay to be the strong, steady woman in the center of your family all the time. Take your time to process your emotions and also to ask for help. Use your faith when you feel alone and lost, and look for your family and friends to look for their love and time to hear you. I love that, Monica. And I want to also lend you just a suggestion that you can choose to borrow if you like, but it's also okay to you actually said it, not to be okay. It's okay not to be. We don't have to always be strong, right? We tell ourselves this story because we've been told this story. People have told us you have to be strong. You're a strong, independent woman, or you're a strong woman of color, you're strong Latino, you're a strong Black woman. And you don't have to be, right? There's no way we can always be strong all the time. Not even AI could do that, right? I use AI a lot, and AI at times tells me I need a break, right? And if AI could take a break, I mean, can't we, right? Like as humans, it is really impossible to be strong all the time. But we take on this narrative and we tell ourselves it has to be this way, and it doesn't. it's okay not to be. Like Tiana said, sometimes you have to take off the cape and feel safe to do so. Tiana, did you want to weigh in?
Shanequa, you made so many great points. I'm trying to figure out where to pinpoint. I think one thing that stands out to me, a client mentioned in an earlier session, she said the narrative that I grew up with no longer serves me. And I don't know what to do with that. And I think that's the experience of a lot of individuals in our communities and growing up with a narrative that has been instilled in us since childhood, and navigating the world, navigating society, navigating our experiences, our own relationships, and realizing that those narratives no longer serve us. I don't want to parent in that way. I don't want to seek out employment in that way. I don't want to fill in the blank. So I want to extend grace for anyone who is in the room with us today, who finds themselves in a space of battling narratives that no longer serve them, narratives from their childhood that are still seeping into adulthood that no longer serve them, but feeling difficulty and conflict and not knowing how to balance the two. I want to acknowledge that. And to that, I'll say it's okay to change the narrative, because at the end of the day, we are the authors of our stories, regardless of what family and friends and expectations that are put on us. We are the authors, despite what they say. And if there are folks in your immediate circle that no longer fit the narrative you are trying to create for yourself, it's okay to implement boundaries as well. It's okay to disconnect from them for a while, to align and come back to what feels whole and true for you.
I wanted to invite others to be able to ask questions too, but one of the things that you said, Tiana, is sometimes we have this narrative, and you got to ask yourself, where did this story come from? Who told me this story? Did it come from me, or did it come from someone else? And I always tell people this: there are two types of stories that are being told, maybe more than that. But the ones that I really focus on is the story that we tell ourselves and the story that we tell other people. And then, of course, there's a story that other people tell us about ourselves that may not be true, similar to what you said, Tiana. Sometimes we take on this identity that's not even us, or we take on, and then it almost feels like betrayal to say, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to live like my parents. I don't want to be in this cycle of abuse. I don't want to hit my children. That's a big one, right? Black, brown families, right? Especially with millennials and Gen Zs, et cetera. I don't want to hit my kids. I don't want to grow up yelling at my children. But then it also feels like a betrayal to your identity culturally or ethnically, or dismissal of the story that you've been told. But like Tiana said, you are the author of your own life. It is absolutely okay to rewrite the narrative of your life and of your story. And Dr. Green, I feel like you deal so much in a realm of mastermind tools that I think is an incredible new emerging field that I believe we should really adopt in mental health. But wondering if you can give like some concrete ways that we could rewrite our own story through shifting maybe our thoughts and our paradigm.
Absolutely. A big thing that you said is maybe it's, stories that we've told ourselves. Maybe it's stories or things that other people have told us. Maybe it's a combination of the two. And so it all comes down to we have to question each thought that we have. Every single thought that we have builds into thought patterns. And once those thought patterns become frequent enough, that's going to be a certain way of thinking, or what we call a mindset or a framework that our mind operates in. And when we have a certain mindset, it's almost automatic without even thinking, like, that this is the story that I'm going with. This is the story that's running my life. This is the narrative that runs my life, right? So when we have just an individual thought, right, where does that thought come from? Let me question the validity of this thought. How do I know that this thought is true? Why do I think this thought? When we start asking ourselves those questions, a quick example is like the 5 why rule, asking ourselves why 5 times, right? Asking ourselves why 5 times until we get to the root of, okay, I see there was just a misconception, or I see that this wasn't true at all, or I see that this is true, but I was looking at it through the wrong lens, right? That gives us clarity. Very rarely do we think about our thoughts. We just have the thought and accept it as truth, as gospel, as fact. When we think about our thoughts, it gives us a chance to really either validate or remove that thought as a false belief. And I think then we're able to create true stories that are true to our core and true to who we are and are aligned with our real beliefs, and not just things that we believe because of our childhood or because of our experiences in our adolescence or things that we've experienced as adults. We all have internal filters that shape the way that we perceive the world. If all 58 of us went to watch a movie and somebody asked us, what was the movie about? We would recall the movie, but with slightly different details, right? Because we all have different internal filters based on our experiences that we've had in the world that make certain things important to us and make certain things stick out to us. So we have these internal filters for our experiences that will shape what our narrative is. But we have to make sure that this isn't just stuff that we're accepting. We need to question it and make sure that this is actual truth and not just stuff that we've been fed and we accept willingly. I think that's a big thing, and it's called metacognition, thinking about our thinking. Very simple tool to do, and you're able to do it anywhere at any time, and it will lead to a lot more peace, but a lot more truth as well, where your thoughts, your belief, and your actions are all aligned, and you're not feeling like you're being pulled in multiple different directions. It's a really good question.
So incredible, Dr. Green. And I love metacognition. For those of you that are probably like, what in the world is that? That's just really paying attention to your own thoughts. About 95% of what we do is subconscious. That means we don't think about most of our behavior. We're just on autopilot. We're on autopilot. And only about 5% of our behavior is conscious. So what Dr. Green is talking about is actually starting to pay attention to your own thoughts. Sometimes it's just pausing. If you're a person that just gets angry, like you just blow up, or if you know someone that just blows up, you're like, I went from 0 to 100. You didn't really go to 0 to 100. You were already at 95, and then you went to 100. So a lot of times we're carrying a lot of things. And so what metacognition does is it gives you an opportunity to actually start to be in tune with your own self, really. Just start to be in tune with yourself. And it gives yourself the opportunity to pause and think. And I'm looking at the comments in the chat box. We want to open it up for questions, and I see some coming in. I think the first one was from Enos. Enos, did you want to unmute and ask your question and maybe provide more context to your question, how to forget a person? Enos, I don't know if you feel comfortable either unmuting or writing it in the chat box, just to provide more context to your question. Okay, so I'll give Enos more time. We'll give him more time, and we'll give him more time to respond. And I'll move to the next one, which is from Ariel, that I'm seeing. I'm trying to do it in order. And Ariel says, what are the tools you said should be implemented in mental health that are emerging in neuroscience? I think that was for you, Dr. Green, that question. What are the tools you said should be implemented in mental health that are emergent in neuroscience?
Was this from when I initially was speaking, or just now when answering the question?
That
Um,
came in a few moments ago at
okay,
7.
so that was probably about the metacognition. So essentially, it is analyzing your own thoughts. We have thought patterns where we can think one thought and it'll lead to another thought, and it'll lead to another thought and another thought and another thought. Sometimes these thoughts aren't even complete. We can have a fraction of a thought, and that can evoke an emotion, which then evokes a behavior. What we think shapes the way that we feel. What we feel shapes our behavior. Our behavior then shapes our actions, and our actions shape our lives, right? So your life, if you don't put it in check, could be shaped off of fractions of thoughts. So how do you get in control of this? If you just write down certain thoughts that you have throughout the day that aren't good, that you really don't like, right? You write them down, and you when you write something down, you have to write it completely. It's not just going to be a fraction of a thought. And when you write it down, you're able to look at it, you're able to read it, and it's able to be a full and complete thought. And then you're able to do the metacognition. Where did this thought come from? When was the first time that I felt this, or that I thought this thought, if it's not the first time now? What evidence serves this thought, right? So for example, the old, I always give this example. I'm underperforming at work, and it's just adding to my stress and decreasing my mental health, which then makes it reciprocal. It's making me even worse at work in my performance, and I'm about to get fired, and how am I going to provide for my family, yada yada, so on and so forth. You got to ask your question: why am I underperforming at my work? Why do I feel that? Right? Where's the truth in that? Well, okay, my sales numbers maybe aren't the same as my colleagues. Okay, cool. And the next why? Why are my sales numbers not at the same level as my colleagues? Well, I don't have the level of focus that I need at work, because when I'm at work, I'm thinking about home life. When I'm at home, I'm thinking about work, and I feel like I can just never get it right. Okay, why is your mind in different places than your body is? And why is this on repeat? Well, I just moved into a new city, started a new job. I have a newborn, maybe. I'm a newlywed, and there's a lot of new, and a lot of just adjusting, right? And then you can continue to go, but when you get to a point of like, wow, that's it. This has nothing to do with my ability at work. This has everything to do with the fact that I need to give myself grace, because I have all of these new things in my life, and I haven't even allotted myself the time to transition smoothly. Right. And so that's that's an example of thinking about thinking. I have a thought, but let me actually write it down. If I just thought the thought and just went based off of that, oh, I'm not that good at my job, then that thought is going to turn into a belief. And then guess what? You're not going to be good at your job, because what you believe, you're going to make sure that that actually comes true. It's part of the subconscious mind. But when you went and dove into that thought, you realize the truth under that thought had nothing to do with your ability to perform at work. But you found in the root what the real problem was, and you fixed that problem, which is giving yourself grace, giving yourself time to adjust. Everything else is good. Everything else is smooth, but we have to analyze those thoughts that we have that are limiting belief thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Green. And I'm seeing a lot of those comments coming in. I'm going to give the next question to Tiana. Trying to go back, Enos. I guess Enos says, how do you not think about a person that you used to love too much? How do you forget a person? So Tiana, I'm going to give that question to you. And then I hope I know I'm butchering your name. Ipani, we will go to you after. So Tiana, if you want to answer that or respond to that.
Sure. So Enos, the first thing I would say, if you haven't already, block, unfollow, and delete. Block, unfollow, and delete. That's the first practical tip I can give you, because it really helps to reduce the temptation to re-engage with that person, re-engage with their account, checking in on them to seeing what they're up to, what in a relationship or hobbies, things that they're doing. So block, unfollow, and delete. The next thing I would say is to maybe consider challenging any idealization that's happening. A lot of times, sometimes when we separate from a relationship that no longer serves us, we idealize the experiences with that person, right? And we have certain perceptions of that individual that make us almost feel as though we have to engage with them, because I will not be able to have those experiences unless I'm with that person. So challenging idealization, really connecting to, I'm gonna pause for a second and just ask for everyone to mute their phones or their devices because we're getting some feedback. Thank you. Challenging that idealization and connecting with what felt so great about the relationship or with the person. What is making it so difficult to separate from that person? What did I get that is fueling me to want to re-engage? Was it excitement that I felt in that relationship? Was it love? Was it new experiences? What is it that keeps drawing me back? Is it patterns that reminds me of prior experiences that I want to recreate? Whatever the reasons are that you have identified with that person, I then want you to ask yourself, how can I recreate those experiences? Whether it's on my own, with a new friendship group, with a new experience in my community, but what can I do to help me feel that excitement that I felt in that relationship, or that feeling of love, or that feeling of something new? What can I do for myself that is healthy, that will help me to reimagine what healthy feels like and what feels good for my mental health? I think those would be my top two ways to forget someone that you're having a hard time with forgetting.
Thank you, Tiana. And I know there's a lot coming in, and we only have 12 minutes, so we're going to try to get through as much as possible, and we'll try to limit to 1 or 2 minutes. Ibani, I'm sorry.
Yes, no, it's all right. My name is Ipyani or Yanni, whatever's easier for you to pronounce. First, I just want to say thank you for putting this together. A lot of great tools are being shared here for each one of us to address the mental health needs that we each have. You know, we all go through something. If it's not now, it may be in the future, or we may have got through a storm. But the question that I have, and it's kind of a two-part question. If you guys could, I get a sense that most of the people here are on the East Coast. I'm here on the West Coast, California. I was wondering if you guys could share any examples where you had got community buy-in to address the mental health, because the way I see what we're doing here is more on kind of a one-on-one basis. But are there any examples of where you guys were able to get a block or a community to buy in, to start checking in on one another, to, you know, to get rid of the stigma that we address to mental health? And then the other part of the question is, knowing that many of the people in this country, or the African diaspora, ascribe to some kind of religious or faith belief. What are there any examples that you see in the different houses of worship that are doing good examples of, you know, we it's nothing wrong with the prayer. We want to pray and throw the prayers up, right? But also some mental health issues need to be addressed in the physical world, in the world approaches. Are there any houses of worship that you're seeing that are modeling that, or a good example of taking that kind of lead of integrating the faith as well as, you know, utilizing the worldly tools at our disposal?
I can take that question. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us all the way from the West Coast, and for the work that you're doing. In regards to community buy-in, it really depends on, I want to say, one, I hate to answer like this, but it really does depend on your community. And as a member of your community, I would like to say that you are the expert of that community. Where I found success in doing this work, I've been doing this work for about 15 years, but with my agency for about 11 and a half. And we have a lot of community dialogues where we talk, we come together over bread, you know, Black and brown people, we like to eat. So if you get some food in the midst, right, and you maybe share a topic, maybe don't call it mental health, right? because when you call it that at the beginning, or if you're advertising it as mental health, people may not want to be there. Maybe you call it a community dialogue, and you bring people together over bread, to break bread, and you maybe set an agenda that you want to discuss. And then you can get the feedback of other people. There are other ways that you can do that, do this work as well. We do it mainly through schools. So our reach is community schools. So we reach out to schools and we work with the teachers, the principals, the parents, and the students. And we have a mental health aid curriculum that we implement in schools. And we also provide the services as well, one-on-one. But I think the power really is in bringing communities together and just having a dialogue. I think magic happens in dialogues. So if you can bring your community together over some chicken and biscuits and set a topic, or maybe something healthier, and set an agenda and set a topic, I think you can start getting the conversation going. And for houses of worship, I have a segment. I work with pastors and churches around mental health and faith. I think a large part of it is education and helping pastors, or educating pastors, or training pastors how to first understand what mental health is, and then how to build out a crisis response plan within their churches that involves referrals to community-based organizations and clinics. I've seen churches do that well. And and I'm happy to share offline some other tips and techniques. And again, thank you for your question. That was really, really thoughtful. Angela, you had your hand raised. Did you want to jump in? We only have a few minutes.
Oh, yeah, sure. If you have time to answer this. In the beginning, something that you said that really resonated with me was talking about policy, like how the policies reflect like our reality. So I wanted to ask, like, I don't really know anything about that, but if you're just a beginner and you want to get involved with, shaping the policies that shape our reality in the community, what would be a good way to start?
Community board. That's a great question, Angela. Your community board has so much power. I always tell people, if you want to get involved in policy or just in shaping it, start within your local community. There's so much going on there that you probably are not even aware of. I've served on my community board for years. I serve on a lot of boards, but the community board is the one most closest to home, because that's really what goes on in your block, down the block from where you live. I would start there. Also, there are advocacy days that take place. I would say connect with, like, and maybe we can put some resources in a chat, but there are advocacy groups where you have an opportunity to go up to Albany, depending on where you are, or to your state legislator, and to advocate and to talk about a bill around mental health that you care about. Having a meeting with your council member, it's really powerful. Your voice really counts, because you guys are the ones that vote them in, and you can hold them accountable. I would say also having a meeting with your city council member and talking with them as well can help around shaping policy. And there's so many other ways, but those are just a few. I know we're like coming close to time, so maybe Karen and then Charles.
I'm speaking here as somebody who's I'm a boomer. I'm like was born the very tail, about a couple of years into the very tail end of the baby boomer generation. But I find that I've been in the mental health system for many years, and I find that many of them don't address what I was going through. Most of them just flush it out, or just say, just cope for the day. And I haven't gotten the help that I need, even though I went to these mental health agencies. And I'm about ready to give up.
Karen, thank you so much. I'm going to give that question to Tiana, and Dr. Green. You can take Charles.
Aaron, I just want to acknowledge what you said today because I think it's an experience that is shared by many. And it is an unfortunate experience and feeling like you have done the work to support your mental health and it not be reciprocated. So I want to honor that for you. I think if there's any feedback or guidance that I can give is to one, feel free to stay on after this call is finished to connect with either one of us. There are some resources that I would love to share with you. And I know it can feel like a daunting task in reaching out and not getting the support that feels like the support that you need. But I would truly say to you, Karen, please don't give up. I've had clients come to me and say, Miss Washington, you are the 10th therapist, you are the 15th therapist, you are the 20th therapist that I am now meeting with. And I am just about tired. And to that, I tell them, kudos to you for continuing in this journey. There are a number of resources, NAMI being one of them, that have low to free cost therapy services available where you can speak to someone that is specific to your age group, specific to your experiences, and someone that can really help to navigate what you have been experiencing. The Open Path Collective is a nonprofit network of therapists who provide services as low as $30 to $60. And again, you can filter based on age, based on area of concern, and you can find someone to help you navigate this journey that you are on. And when you experience those self-defeating thoughts, Karen, I'm going to ask you to journal them and to write them down. And I know sometimes in the process of it, it can feel like, why am I doing this? Where is this going to go? But for every negative thought that you write down, I'm going to ask that you reimagine, as we mentioned earlier, what a positive thought could be in relation to that. Today, I'm feeling hopeless. What can I do to change that? Whether it's going outside for 10 minutes, whether it's calling a friend, whether it's connecting through events like this. But like I said, please don't log off after this, our meeting is finished, because I want to connect you with some more resources to help you on your journey. And I pray that that response is helpful for you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your response. I really appreciate it.
Aaron, thank you. Can we just take Charles' question, Francis, and end? Charles.
Hi, yeah, I just had a question. What about a person that's been brought up sort of oppressed all the time by elders, part of the upbringing, they've been oppressed and weren't allowed to express themselves, they have a hard time expressing themselves, they've been traumatized potentially without realizing by their elders because the way they've been brought up. And now they're in their 30s, 40s, or late 40s. And where would such person start? Like, where do they start? Because they have a hard time expressing themselves because they never were given a chance to express or say anything back because the way they've been brought up. So they simply don't know how to talk back. Not to talk back is the wrong way of saying, but let's say how to say something in response of somebody being aggressive or being overly assertive and trying to bully the person, so they don't know what to say because they never practice how to say anything back because the way they've been brought up and they've been oppressed, they suppress their feelings because the way they've been brought up, so they don't even know how to face the real world out there, on their own. They don't know how to be independent. So where would such person start?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. And I work with individuals with similar situations. Essentially, this is just a case where there is some unlearning that needs to happen. So early on in childhood, between the ages of 0 and 7, that's when our subconscious mind is the most active. When they say kids are like a sponge, there's a reason for it. We learn so much and we take it in. And for the rest of our adolescent and adult lives, it's like everything we learned in those first 7 years is now a record, and it's playing on loop and it's playing on repeat. So our fears, our self-beliefs, our capabilities, our desires, all of that, right, is just playing on repeat. So we have to figure out a way of unlearning what we learned in that era, because when our elders treated us a certain way or said, oh, you know, this thing about that person or that thing about you, you believed it because of how impressionable you are. Any of us would have believed it because of how impressionable. That's just the way that our minds work. So with that, there is a lot that you can do to kind of tap into the subconscious mind. And this is just a place to start. You want to tap into the subconscious mind in order to help yourself unlearn what you've learned in those primary years. So when we first wake up, our mind is the most impressionable, the most malleable, right? We go through brainwave states called alpha and theta brainwave states. And this is before the critical mind pops in and says all the negative beliefs. Oh, you're only this good, or you can only do that, or remember what they said about you, or look at where you came from, yada, yada, so on and so forth, right? And it's the same right before we fall asleep. We're in that same alpha and theta brainwave state. So I would suggest to you is doing two things in that state: is affirming who you want to be, as well as creating a visual imagery. Every belief that we have about ourselves has a mental imagery associated with it. If I believe I'm not enough, or if I believe I'm not a good communicator, if I believe I'm not good at expressing myself, there's a mental imagery associated with that belief, right? So we need to change that. And then with the affirmations, I want you to say everything that you are, right? It's you're saying things that you want to be, but you're saying it as if it's in the present. I am a confident communicator. I am expressive. I am in tune with my emotions, right? And here's the thing: you only want to say it in the positive. You don't want to say, I'm not a silent person, or I'm not this, I'm not that, because the subconscious mind doesn't recognize negative. It only recognizes positives. If I told you, don't think of a blue elephant elephant popped in your mind because the subconscious only recognizes positive. So say everything in the positive manner, right? The other thing that people have issues with is, well, what if I'm not even believing it? I'm saying all this stuff, but like, I know I'm not that. I want you to go back to where this was actually true. If we're dealing with the thing of being a confident communicator, there was a time where you used to be confident before you learned that behavior of not being expressive, not knowing how to maybe respond in the right way, or not knowing how to speak up in the right way. When you were a toddler or a baby even, right? We were all confident. We'd be in the room just naked, all eyes on us, and didn't care about a thing, right? Even as a toddler, we didn't care about the self-conscious, the subconscious, and the self-esteem and all of that stuff. That was learned later on to have doubts about who we are, doubts about how we look, doubts about our capabilities. So I want you to go back to the point and realize, like, this is something that I used to have before I learned that I shouldn't be expressive, or I should just keep quiet, or I should just stay a shell of a person. There was a time when you were expressive before that shut down. Call that to your mind, call that to memory when you are doing these affirmations. Now, this is just the start, right? You're allowing yourself the ability to even have a chance of becoming more expressive because you're rewiring the belief behind it. The second part is being more practical about it. So going to someone and helping them. Maybe there's a coach that talks about specific things with this: being more expressive, being an effective communicator, a confident communicator, being emotionally intelligent, and knowing how to respond to different people who come from different walks of life and come at you in different manners, right? They may come at you aggressive. They may come at you passive aggressive. They may come at you angry. They may come at you resentful, whatever. How do I respond to that? There are people out there who do that. We can talk even after this call, and I can get you in touch with the right program for that. That's a really, really good question. And I tried to answer as much of it in just a few minutes. And I know there were other questions that I was not able to get to. I'm going to put my personal email in here. And I would love for you to email me the questions. I know there were some that were directed to me and I don't want them to go unanswered. So I'm going to shoot my email in here, send them to me, and we can even hop on a call if you want to. If it's a lot to unpack, I would love to do that. Because I want to make sure that everybody who came here is coming to get what you came here for, the healing, the revelation, the aha, the epiphany. I want to make sure that happens. So definitely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Green. I'm give it back to NAMI. NAMI, thank you so much. And thank you to my colleagues, Tiana and Dr. Green. I really appreciate you so much for inviting us on this platform. And we just want to say thank you. It's been a privilege. Thank you for feeling safe with us and for trusting us. That's not something that we take for granted or lightly. Thank you for being vulnerable with us. And we really do hope that you stay in touch. If there's anything that you need from us that we can do for you, consider us an extended part of your family and your community. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to all of the speakers, but those that are on this Zoom video for your time. We really wanted to honor your time, but this was so tremendous. It was a lot of information. So I just want to say thank you for all of those that remained. So in closing, I want to extend a heartfelt gratitude to our wonderful speakers, Shanequa E. Moore, Dr. Jeffrey Green, and Tiana Washington for sharing their expertise with us tonight. People have joined these public education events since 2020 from almost all over the United States and over 36 countries. So next time, please feel free to invite a friend and know that NAMI-NYC helpline and all virtual programs are available to New Yorkers and beyond. If you have any questions, please call, chat, or email us at 212-684-3264 or helpline at NAMI-NYC. That's helpline at NAMI-NYC.org. And with that, please, we would love you to give us your feedback. And it's very important for us to help us plan our future events. So please take a few moments to fill out the survey. I believe that Barbara already placed it in the chat because we really want to hear from you. Thank you so much for your time and have a great night. And for those that will be traveling home, safe travels. Thank you for coming.